Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday, August 11th, and it is another very hot 90-plus degree day here on the southeastern North Carolina coast. And what I want to discuss today is when to stop fertilizing your fig trees. And there's a heat wave among much of the country right now, but despite that, we have to start talking about frosts and freezes, because for many of us, for the overwhelming majority of us in the country, we're right about knocking on that date where we need to start scaling down our fertilizing practices and preparing for the cold. This video is going to primarily focus on container-grown fig trees, but many of the principles can be applied to fig trees grown in ground, as well as any other fruit tree that experiences a dormancy period. Fig trees are a fruit tree that experiences a significant dormancy period, and when they are dormant, they are extremely hardy to cold temperatures. However, it is very important that you prepare your fig tree for dormancy, because if they are actively growing and they get hit by a sudden frost or freeze, they can take on a lot of damage. So that's why you have to slowly ramp down your fertilizing schedule during the warm season, and then slowly slow down their metabolic rates to prepare them for the incoming frosts and freezes. And I'm going to take you to one of my trees to illustrate what I'm talking about. This fig tree right here is my Martinenca ramata tree. It is not one of my earliest trees. I planted this one mid-season, so its wood is in varying stages of maturity. So that's why it's going to provide such a good example, so I can illustrate to you all why it's so important to prepare your fig trees for dormancy. Alright, I just removed a few leaves so you can see things better. Here you can see very, very dark brown hard wood. And as you travel up the tree, you start seeing that the wood, as you go up, becomes greener. Right around here you see that there is a transition where the hardwood starts to begin turning into green wood, and then this wood becomes almost completely green wood way up at the top. So the first thing I'm going to do to this tree is I'm going to find the green wood all the way up at the top, and I'm going to pinch off the nodes. I'm going to pinch the tips off. So there and there. And pinching those tips off will help stop the growth. I don't want this tree to grow any higher. It's already gotten tall enough. I don't want more green wood on this tree. So pinching that off will help stop the growing process, and I will keep an eye on the tops of this tree to make sure that they don't grow back and continue to grow, because I want my tree to focus on hardening off and turning this wood into brown wood as soon as possible. The brown wood is called fully lignified hardwood, and I'll explain why you want that to happen. So down at the bottom of this tree, you have fully lignified hardwood. And this hardwood right here is very resistant to frosts and freezes. It's resistant to desiccation from cold, wind-blown cold air. So this is what I want the tree to lignify as much as possible and get as much of this hardwood as possible, because that's what is truly cold tolerant. Now up here, where you start seeing the greener wood, this is where I start becoming less confident. Green wood, unlike fully lignified hardwood, is very sensitive to frosts and freezes. So if a frost and freeze hits this exposed wood, it can cause a lot of damage and cause significant dieback all the way to the lignified wood. Or if you're in a location where you see temperatures that are 10 degrees or less, it can die back all the way to the roots. So you can see that this wood right here, it's starting to callus over. The lignification process is beginning, and I still have about 90 to 100 days left in my growing season before my first frost. So I'm very confident that this wood right here is all going to lignify, because the process has already begun. This green growth that you see here is a totally different story. There is no lignification that has begun yet. So I want to spend the next 90 to 100 days of my growing season lignifying this growth. I want this to become hardwood and as resistant to frosts and freezes as possible. This is why we need to pinch off our tips, and why we have to start ramping down our fertilizing process, because it's the nitrogen in fertilizer the first number when you see number dash number dash number. It's the first number, the nitrogen in the fertilizer concentration, that boosts green growth. So we want to begin starving our trees of fertilizing on a very controlled, slowly ramping down schedule, so they stop putting out so much green growth, and the tree can focus on turning its green growth that it already has into hard wood. And I'm going to show you a schedule on how you want to slowly ramp down your fertilizing over your last 90 plus days of your growing season to accommodate this. Now, as I mentioned before, to optimally prepare your figs for the cold weather, you should slowly ramp down fertilizing. You shouldn't just keep fertilizing normally and then just randomly cut them off one day. The reason why is you still have quite a bit of growing season left. You have to feed your trees to some degree. And for many of us, we're just starting to see the first few ripening fruits. So ripening fruits does take a lot of energy from the tree, so we need to make sure to feed the trees, but slowly ramp them down at such a rate that they will not put out a whole lot of new growth that will be susceptible to die off from the frost and freezes. So, before you can do anything, you need to figure out what your first frost date is. As a gardener, your two most important dates to know: it's not your birthday, it's not Christmas, it is your first frost date and your last frost date of the year. So now, since we're deep into summer, your first frost date becomes the most important date that you're worried about, because most of what we grow as gardeners cannot survive frosts and freezes. Now, there are a number of resources online for you to find this date. You can check Dave's Garden, you can check Farmer's Almanac. Just Google it. You'll get 50 different resources where you can just punch in your zip code, or you can look at a map. And it's a good thing to take a few of those sources and come up with an average date. So for people that live in the Northeast, you probably see your first frost in October. Same thing with a lot of people in the Midwest. For people in the Southeast, we typically see our first frost in November. And for people on the West Coast, they typically see their first frost in November as well. So this is why it's so important for us to think of this now, because the majority of the country is 60 to 100 days away from their first frost. So after you have your first frost date, what you need to do is you need to focus on this number 90. 90 is important because it takes about 90 days from the formation of the first figlet for it to ripen in ideal conditions. So that's why 90 is our benchmark date. Once you hit 90 days, anything that forms 89 days and less before your frost date, your figs just aren't going to have enough time to ripen. So figs formed 90 days and less before your first frost date, you can ignore them. So that's why the schedule is set up the way it is. When we are 90 days or greater, well, when we're greater than 90 days before our first frost, you are just going to fertilize normally. And what do I mean by normally? I'm going to link above to my fertilizing figs video. Follow the information in that video. I recommend applying soluble fertilizer every 7 days and a slow release granulated fertilizer like an organic 555 every 14 days. The soluble fertilizer is what gives your trees a big boost. It's almost like a growth hormone. It's not like a growth hormone, but when I say that, I'm saying it's just very powerful. It's like a huge dump of calories to them, and it makes them grow very, very quickly. The slow release fertilizer provides more micronutrients and gives them a balanced source of energy. So I like combining them both. If you are more than 90 days before your first frost, continue fertilizing as normal, like in my video, my fertilizing video that I linked to above. Now, once you start hitting 90 days before frost, that is when you have to start changing the way you're thinking. Now, 90 days is still quite a while before your frost, so you have to feed your trees. What you want to do is you want to start ramping down how much soluble fertilizer you're giving them, so you're not encouraging so much new leafy growth. So what you want to do is you take your original concentration that you're giving them in your normal season, and you're reducing that by half. So, for example, in my fertilizing video, I'm taking a 5-gallon paint bucket and I'm mixing in 2 green Miracle-Gro scoopers of soluble fertilizer. That equates to 3 tablespoons in a 5-gallon bucket. When I reduce my soluble fertilizer, I'm only going to put 1.5 tablespoons or 1 scooper of the soluble fertilizer instead. We're not trying to give them such a huge dump of energy. We're trying to slow down their growth, but still give them enough energy that they can ripen their fruits, because at this point in the year, my trees are loaded with green figs that need to ripen. So they still need some strength. We're just not trying to give them so much that they explode into new growth. And we are going to maintain our slow release schedule, our slow release application every 14 days, which if you check out my fertilizing video, I recommend, I believe, 2 tablespoons of 555 organic granules every 14 days. So from 90 days to day 61, you want to maintain this schedule. Now, when you hit 60 days before frost, that is like the official kickoff to autumn. The weather is getting cooler. We're seeing 50s at night, maybe even 40s in some places. You're seeing highs in the 60s and 70s. You're going to start seeing your trees slow down with growth. So, 60 days before your first frost, you want to end your soluble fertilizer. You do not, in these cool temperatures, want to be dumping a lot of strong fertilizer on there that is going to encourage new green growth. Any green growth that comes out at this point in the year is going to be killed by frost. So we're going to end our soluble fertilizer routine completely, and we're going to water with plain water only. The only thing we will do is we will apply our final applications of slow release fertilizers. And you're going to apply 1 application at 60 days before frost and 1 application at 45 days before frost. And again, this is only 2 tablespoons of a slow release, pretty weak 555 organic granulated fertilizer. That's not super strong. What you want to do is you just want to trickle feed your plants, because 60 days, 2 months for a container fig with no food at all is not going to be good for it. You just want to give it a little bit of slow release so you can trickle feed them as it slowly breaks down, so you don't completely starve them for 2 months. That's not good. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. Then we move to the less than 45 days before frost. We are not going to apply any fertilizers at all. That last application of slow release will take several weeks to break down. You're not going to starve them completely, and their metabolic rates at this point in the year is going to be so low they need very little food. So again, no fertilizers, and that is going to help prepare your tree for frost, freeze, and dormancy. Between the cool temperatures and the lack of food, the tree is going to practically go to sleep. Its metabolic rate is going to slow down, it's going to get tired, it's going to get ready for hibernation. So if any freak freezes or frost comes up, the metabolic rate is going to be pretty low, so it shouldn't sustain a lot of damage. Just be aware that any green wood that is still exposed may get damaged with a frost or freeze. Now, there may be some folks watching this video right now that live in the upper Midwest or in the very far Northeast that are beyond 60 days before their first frost. Maybe you're in one of these 2 locations right here. Don't worry about it. If you are in one of these locations and you're 60 days or less before frost and you're still giving your plants soluble fertilizer, just cut it out and then just pretend like this never happened. Cut out the soluble feed and just go down to a little bit of slow release, and then let them trickle feed and prepare them for frost and freeze. In addition, I will also place links in the description of this video to the fertilizers I use that I am referencing throughout this whiteboard. In case you still have a lot of growing season left and you need more fertilizers, feel free to explore them, because that's what I use in my own garden. I'm going to leave this whiteboard up on the camera. If it's helpful for you, and I really hope it is, feel free to take a screenshot, print it out, hang it on your fridge, put it somewhere that helps you remember. This is something that you can apply to most of your fruit trees, especially your deciduous fruit trees that can survive frosts and freezes. So it's a good thing to have. Everybody, I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a lot of information, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I will answer them as best as I can. Bear in mind that I am not the world's greatest expert at this. This is not necessarily the best way in the world. This is just the way that I'm going to be doing it. So there are people out there with a lot more experience than me that know better than me, so don't think I'm the end-all be-all. I'm just showing you what I'm going to do this year to prepare my fig trees for frosts and freezes. So everyone, once again, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more videos like these. Thank you all. I really appreciate your viewership, and I hope to see you all again next time.